why it's always better to have a process in place that gets you to move through the releases. Because if you just want to jump from 1.6 to 1.9, for example, I mean, we could see a real example of that happening. It still didn't work for me. So I had to delete it and then reinstall it. The good thing with this situation is because the Cert Manager app itself is not really a stateful application. So you could safely delete and install again without anything breaking. All right. So I have installed Cert Manager. And what I've done is to create the cluster issuer. So this cluster issuer has the DNS configuration that I need to configure TLS so that it can issue certificate, it can do the order and all that. Now, I've done the certificate for Artifactory, but we're going to do together for Jenkins. Okay, so if I do get certificates, actually, it should be in the tooling namespace. Okay, so you can see this is our endpoint, artifactory.masterclass.tooling.that. You guys can actually go there if you like. So I can share it with every one of you guys. So you can just click on that, take it to the browser, you would actually see it. And you can see the state is true. The red is true. Okay. And this was done because I had to update the ingress. So what I did was to add this annotation here to point to the cluster issuer. So this is the cluster issuer. Let's encrypt prod masterclass. So the cluster issuer has this name. Okay, let's encrypt prod masterclass. Okay. Yeah. And then the TLS part of the YAML configuration has the host, the exact host that we have here. Okay. And then this is the secret name. So if I do get secret, so you see we have a secret created here, and the type of this secret is TLS. So if I open up this right now and do get secrets, let me give the name of the secret, and then -O, which is the output type that I want. So I'm going to do an output type of YAML. Okay, so you see that we have the, let's see, we have the TLS cert, that's the certificate, and then the key, right? So your Nginx ingress controller will use this information for TLS configuration. So if you then go into your Nginx ingress controller pod, the etc nginx.com file, you will then see how it's getting this certificate information. And that's how you can then go to the browser right here. And then if you click on this and it says connection is secure, certificate is valid. If you open up that, you can see that it is issued by L3, which is, if you get the details, you'll see Let's Encrypt there. Organization is Let's Encrypt. So that's to show that it's actually using these certificates, which has been issued by our cluster issuer, which we've configured for it to use Let's Encrypt. Now, this is an encoded key. So, for example, if I copy that and do something like echo, if I echo that, and then I pass that into base 64-D code, you see that's the content of the private key. Okay. All right. So we've done this by creating an ingress resource to create the ingress for Artifactory, but we won't do it this way for Jenkins. We'll use a different strategy. I'll show you how to do that. But before we do that, we just need to create our Docker repository. Okay, so that we don't get to use Docker Hub. All right, so rather than use Docker Hub where we can pull directly from Docker Hub and all that, we can actually pull from our own private repository. So instead of doing Docker pull, you can just instead of doing Docker pull from Docker Hub, you can do Docker pull from Artifactory. Okay, so let's get into that. So our documentation has all the screenshots and all that, so we can actually follow that. So if you notice, this is what we're going to do. Let's come here. So let's create a local repository. And by the way, there are different types of repositories in Artifactory. So I'll walk you through them. Okay, so you click on the administration and repository section. And then number 3 is add repository. So let's do that. So if you come to administration, click on repositories, okay, which I'm there right now. This is what you see, and then you see add repository, and you see that there are a number of repositories. There's a local, remote, virtual, and federated repository. I'll explain to you these 3 in particular. I haven't actually used this, but I think it's more of if you have repositories across different instances of Artifactory and you want to federate them together, okay? But we'll focus on this. Now, local repository is more of your local repository. I mean, as the name itself sounds, it's local. So you can create a repository and store your artifacts directly in that local repository. Then there is a virtual repository. So let's talk about the virtual repository first of all. So with a virtual repository, okay, someone is. Do you mind going on mute, please? Okay. All right. So with the remote repository, no, I was actually talking about the virtual. With the virtual repository, you can have multiple local repositories and put them all behind a virtual repository. Okay. So for example, you can create a repository for Jenkins. Images. You can use another repository for another type of application. So rather than do Docker pull pointing to Jenkins local repository directly, you can actually point to a virtual repository that has a combination of many local repositories. And we'll try that today so you see what that looks like. With a remote repository, it has its own use case. I've seen that requirement a lot, especially with Helm. So one of the reasons why you might want to create a Helm a remote repository is, for example, as you can see here, the repository where we're pulling this chart from is from charts.jetstack.io. So when you do Helm repo add or Helm install and all that, and it's coming from here, this is still going over the internet. So to avoid having your infrastructure to pull charts directly from the internet, what you could do is to create a remote repository that points to this endpoint. So that when you're doing your Helm repo add, you're actually adding your own Artifactory, okay? The particular remote repository in your Artifactory is what you're actually adding. But the moment you talk to Artifactory, it's actually talking to whatever upstream repository that you've configured, which is on the internet. Okay, so that's a use case where, rather than just having HashiCorp Vault, Jenkins, and all the other charts, which can be in different multiple places, you can have all of them mirror. Is more like mirroring those endpoints, right? So you just have your repository, remote repository in Artifactory, and then you mirror it to those other ones. Okay, so let's create our first local repository. So you can create different types. I've talked about Helm, for example. So if you were to do that for Helm, you just select it, but we're just going to do for Docker right now. And there's a lot of different use cases. You can keep artifacts for your applications, whether you're developing in Go, in Node, with npm Maven, Java, you could just do whatever you want. Okay, even your Terraform is there. So let's select Docker. So let's give it a key. So we can just give these, actually, let's do it because we're going to do Jenkins next, right? So let's do this for Jenkins. And let's just follow our screenshot so that we are on the same path, okay? All right, so that was named tooling, but you can name it whatever you want anyways, it's fine. All right, so let's do that. So Jenkins, and let's just create a repository. Nothing more, just leave everything as default. Okay, so we've created a repository is of the type of Docker. Now let's create another one. So let's say local repository. Actually, we can do that for tooling. So the tooling is for the tooling application. Remember, we have an application that is the tooling app. Okay, so we may want to keep our Docker images for that particular application in our repository for Docker. So we just name that and just create a local repository. Okay, so we have two different. In fact, let me see if I can rename this. Actually, let me delete this, recreate it just to make it a lot more visible what that is about. So I'll just call it tooling app. Okay, so that will make a lot more sense. Okay, so we have the tooling app, we have Jenkins. So what we can then do is to have a virtual repository that will combine both Jenkins and tooling app together. So anytime we want to pull down images, we don't have to go directly to either Jenkins or this. We just go directly to this virtual repository and then tell it which of these images we want to pull down. So virtual, it's going to be Docker as well. And this is be our DevOps tools. Let's just call it DevOps tools. Create virtual repository. Okay, so if you select this, if I go into that, this is where you now get to move those applications. So I can drag in there and I can select or just do that, whichever one works for you. So you can select some. If you created other local repositories, you can, choose which one you're interested in, because sometimes you may not actually want, or maybe you're just interested in the tooling app and a few others and not Jenkins. You can do that. But in this case, we're just going to use both. Okay. All right. So DevOps tools. And if let me see how to get the URL. Let me see. Should we go scroll down? Okay, so we have to go into our repositories. So let's go back. So we go into repositories, this card. And then you have to select the virtual. So okay, no, this is when it was. Okay, no, artifacts. Okay, that's so we have to go to artifacts. Okay, there we go. So if you notice, there are two icons here. So there's the settings icon here, and there's this other one that looks like a cube. So if you go into Artifactory and click on artifacts, okay, that's where you'll find your DevOps tools. So if you select that, that's where you will then find your URL. So this is the URL to this remote repository. Okay. All right, cool. So what we're going to do now is to try to push some images there. Okay, so because we're going to have to install Jenkins and all that. So what we'll do is our use case is to ensure that we don't pull Jenkins images from Docker Hub. Okay, and we'll talk about the reasons for that, especially with the way Jenkins is. There's a whole lot of reasons why you don't even want to do that with Jenkins, because we want to automate things as much as possible. With Jenkins, you use plugins, you create credentials, you do all sorts of things. Okay, so you want to use custom Jenkins images, and you want to be able to manage them and not just use the default one out of the box. All right. So I have my MacBook doesn't quite work well with Docker. So what I've done is I have this Ubuntu instance that has Docker installed. Okay, I hope it has Git installed as well. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. So what we're going to do is let's go to let's go to Docker Hub and search for Jenkins. Okay. So we're first of all going to have to get this Jenkins image down. Okay. So let's do Docker pull. Okay. So while that is pulling down, let's go through this a little bit. Oh. Okay, so that's done.
Grapes, yeah. Okay, come up there. Yeah.
What's happening today? Everyone is not muting. Okay. So our URL is this better URL. Okay, so one thing you have to bear in mind is this. With virtual repositories, this is very, very key, very important. You cannot actually push to a virtual repository. You can only pull from it, okay? So what we want to do is we want to take a Jenkins image from Docker Hub and we want to push to Artifactory. So we can't push to the Devops tools because this is a virtual repository, okay? We can't actually push to it, but we can only push to it through the local repository. So we're going to push to the local repository directly, but to pull from Artifactory, we can either pull from the local repository or from the virtual repository. So bear that in mind. Okay, so this is the local. So yes.
Yeah, so I want to ask, for instance, if we have GCR, like on GCP or anything of the likes, there's no need for Jenkins, right?
If you have what?
Like a Google container registry.
Yeah, so
all this
a Google container registry is similar to having an Artifactory like this.
Yeah.
Right? It's also more like having ECR, which is Amazon's Elastic registry as well. So whichever registry you use, it still boils down to the fact that you're using a private repository. Okay. So again, always remember, DevOps is not about tools. DevOps is about processes and all this It's a concept. And the concept we're sharing right now is the fact that we're trying to ensure that we don't expose ourselves to always going to the internet to pull things down. Now, which tool is going to do that for us? We have tons of options. Okay. So in this case, we're just talking about a particular tool, which is Artifactory, that can help us to achieve that. It doesn't mean that every organization must use Artifactory. Okay. But you may find yourself working in a company that uses Artifactory. So you then have to learn the specific way that Artifactory works to make things like that happen. The only reason why we're not really talking about GCR, of course, we're not even doing GCP in this particular trend, but something like Amazon's ECR, one of the reasons why we're not really talking about that is because there isn't really much to do because all the heavy lifting has been done by Amazon already. So this is the one that has a heavy lifting. And if you can work with this, it becomes easy for you to work with any other thing because you understand the concept, right? Because if you were using ECR, you just log into it, copy the URL, push there, and that's it. Okay. But with this one, we have to set things up. Please bear with me. There's someone at the door. I just need to quickly get the door. Give me 1 sec. Okay, I'm back. Apologies for that. All right, so someone is asking how are base images updated or upgraded to fix vulnerabilities since the images are not pulled directly from the internet? What from the Brecher report? Okay, so I'm going to answer that. So let's just carry on for now, and we will get to see the points where we get to update the base images. Okay. All right. So what we need to do is to construct the URL such that we're able to push to it properly. So one thing you have to bear in mind, because I had a lot of issues with this while I was working with this. So you have to make sure that you remove the Artifactory here. Okay. And it's the Jenkins one. Actually, no, we have to. Yeah. So we have to so this is pointing to the local Jenkins repo, and then the name of the image itself, and then the version that you want to give it. Okay. So what we have pulled is we pulled Jenkins. Let's go back to Docker Hub and just see what it looks like. Let's have a look at the tags, because we pulled down the latest tag, but I'll prefer we pull a specific version. So let's pull down this JDK 11. So colon JDK 11. Okay. So Docker images, ls. It's Docker image. All right. So we have the latest and JDK 11. What we'll do is, since we have JDK 11, let's just get this, and then we can replace that with this. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to tag this first of all. So Docker tag Jenkins colon JDK 11, and then we tag it with our URL. Well, of course, we need to log into our registry first of all. But let's tag it Jenkins / Jenkins. Okay. Okay, we don't have 1 second. Jenkins / JDK11. Okay, 1 second. Let's see. Let's compare this, because this has definitely worked. Let's log in first of all. Maybe that's why it's not liking it. So we need to do Docker login. I think it's because of the HTTPS. That's probably why I didn't like it, but let's see. So username is admin, and then the password is this. It doesn't like that credential. Let's try that again. Okay, it's because we're pointing to a wrong address. The address is Artifactory. Okay, so we've been able to log in, but one thing you bear in mind is it's loads up the credentials in this file. So if we open up this file, you can see that the auth has put the record here. It's a JSON format, and then it has this base 64 encoded username and credential. So if I do echo that, base 64 decode, you can see it shows admin colon the password that we had in there. So that's how it stores the logon credentials. So what we can then do is let's try to now tag it. Hopefully it's going to work this time. Apologies, guys. My internet got me disconnected. Okay, so let me just set everything back. I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay. I hope you can hear me. And please let me know the last thing you heard.
We can
from
hear
me.
you.
Yeah, because I was actually talking, I didn't realize that I got disconnected. So I don't know if I lost you at any point, but what I was trying to do is to tag the Jenkins image. Okay, so that worked now. So the reason it didn't tag previously was because it didn't have that information, I guess, in the docker.config.json or something like that. All right. So now that it's tagged, let's try to push to it. Docker push. Okay, let's see. Probably expecting HTTPS. Okay, let's see. Jesus. First entity too large. So one of the problems with Artifactory, I've had this problem before. Can't remember how I actually fixed it, but that's why I had to do a backup. Okay, so let's see if this is still there. I don't like that either. Okay. So let me log into this. Okay. Let's try to push to this one and see if this works. Although I have to update the license, but I don't know why the credential is not working. Probably because of the expired license. Okay. All right. I wouldn't want us to waste too much time on this, but it's still not going to make any sense if it doesn't work, because unless this works, we can't really talk about how the whole update and all that works. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll carry on and then we'll come back to this so that at least we make the best use of the time rather than continue troubleshooting on this. So what I would like to do is to move on to the Helm part. Okay, let's deploy Jenkins. Let's see how we can configure the Jenkins, do the Jenkins configuration, and then we'll fall back into this because there's a whole lot of things that will be missing out if we don't get that to work. Okay, so let's go to Artifact Hub. And let's search for Jenkins here. All right. So standard stuff, we're gonna have to do our Helm add, Helm repo updates. I believe I already have that. So let me switch to my local. That already exists. So let's do that. And then we will then install Jenkins. So Helm, install Jenkins, specify the versions and all that. Now, if we do this, you all know what's going to happen with this. Obviously, it's going to install Jenkins and all that, but that's not really what I want to focus on right here because you already know how all of this works. Okay. You're unable to get that update from Jenkins. Yeah. Don't know if that has to do with the internet. I hope you can still hear me. Okay. Okay. All right. So someone has requested for the GitLab repo. Okay. Yeah, he has the repo. So everything, all the documentation is up actually on the website. So if you go to projects 26, you will find everything there. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fetch this. So let me go into this Jenkins folder, first of all. CD into that. So there's nothing in here. Okay. So I'm just going to do Helm fetch that. But there's another thing we can do. Rather than fetch that and Ontario, we can just copy all the values because that's what I'm interested in actually. So I'll just delete this because I don't need the whole chart. What I need is the values file, values.yaml. Okay. And then we can just paste the whole thing in there. So to install this now, we can simply just do Helm install, the name of your Jenkins installation, the repo, the version, and then you can do -F and specify the values file because we're going to have to customize this. So this is the default one. But what I also like to do is to now create another one and call it maybe override values.yaml. Because the best thing to do is not to actually edit this same values file. You can just have an override one that can have a subset of these ones. And what would happen is, let's say, for example, let's see images, image, hold on. Okay, so this is our Jenkins. I'm looking for our Jenkins controller image. Okay, yeah, this is it. So this is the one we're working on. So if we were to point this to our Artifactory, rather than coming to these values file, what we can do is we can just do something like this. So just copy the controller section, put it here. Okay. And we're not making changes to the controller name. We can remove that. So the only thing we're updating is just the location of the image. So we could just do this. So when we are running our Helm install like this, we can just do something like that and just put -F, the location of this file. And this will just install it. So it's still going to take all the values in this file, but because we are specifying an override values file at runtime, the value it finds here will replace whatever value it finds in here. Okay, so that's how we're going to be making changes to this Jenkins. And with Jenkins, there's a whole lot of things. Now, the first thing to talk about, obviously, is the image, because what we want to do is to be able to manage our image, to make changes to things. So if there is, there's two things here. Someone mentioned about vulnerabilities. So if it was for vulnerabilities, it's not really in your control to do that. Well, it is in your control to some extent, okay? But what that would then mean is you have to be working directly with the source code for this Jenkins image. Now, the source code, it's open source. Obviously, you have access to it. So let me show you how to get that. Let me see. I think it should be here. Let me see if it's here. This is the Docker Hub. Okay, yeah. So it points to the Docker Hub. Okay, and then this is the actual source code. So if there are vulnerabilities and you want to, do that, you have to go to your JDK version. So the one we're working on is, I think JDK 11, is it? Yes, it was JDK 11. Docker image ls. So it's JDK 11. So you have to come into the 11 folder, and we're working with JDK. I think it's one of these, CentOS. Okay, so this is the actual source Docker image. So you're basically going to have to come into this repo. You have to fork it. And if you know what you're doing, you have to then come here and do whatever. But because it's open source, it has maintainers and it's actively being worked upon. So vulnerabilities would have been taken care of at this level. All right. Now, to use this, what you will do is to then have your own Docker image. So what you're going to do is, let me show you an example of what it looks like. We'll come back to all that. So let's go to the image section. Okay, so this is an example of what your Docker file will now look like. So you're going to be pulling from Jenkins, which is essentially from Docker Hub, what I just shown you, okay? You specify the version that you want. So in this particular Docker file, it's specifying 2.234 JDK. So if we go into Docker Hub and go to tags, you will find that specific, so 2.234, 2.234-JDK11, okay? JDK 11. Okay, so this is the one that was referenced in this particular documentation. Then you can do other things you want to do. Okay, so here I have copied the script. So there's a certain script. We'll walk through the script right now and why it's doing that. And then we'll run a command to install plugins. Now, the reason you want to do this is to ensure that when Jenkins comes up, you don't want to log on to Jenkins, go into the Manage Jenkins section and start installing plugins. It makes sense rather to bake your image with the plugins and install the plugins in there so that when your Jenkins is coming up, it already has all the images, all the plugins rather, everything already configured. And then the reason why you specify user root here is to be able to do things like this. And once you're done with that, you put it back to the Jenkins user so that once your Jenkins comes up, it can only run with the Jenkins user. That's very important from a security perspective. All right. Now, this script folder that we're copying inside, so your folder structure will look like, so you have your Docker file, obviously, which is this one. Then you have a folder called scripts, and that's the script folder that we're copying. You're copying it into the OPT script within the image. And then there's a file in this script folder called the install plugins. That file has this script in there. So what it's doing is very simple. It's just having a list of plugins that you're interested to work with. Okay, so I've actually put a very few here just for starters. for you to explore and see how things work. Okay, so once you have this, it's in an array, and there is a for loop that does for plugin in. You specify the array, the entire array, and it's going to loop through each of these lines. So for every time it does the loop, it's going to then run this Jenkins plugin CLI hyphen plugins, and then it will install the plugin. So this is a recent addition to Jenkins. The way this was done previously was very, very ugly. You know, you would have used a much more longer shell scripts to install Jenkins plugins, but they released this Jenkins plugin CLI recently, which is very, very handy. So you could just do this and then build your Docker image again. So building it is just going to take the source image and then run this plugins installation, and then you're off to go. So you can then go back. So I have a complete example of this already in my own registry. So if I go to Daria registry, so you can actually use this directly. So what we're going to do, since Artifactory is not working for us at the minute, we'll make use of this. But I'll get to the bottom of that. If we're not able to do it today, the next time will come, I'll let you know what happened, and then we can walk through it. It's just to save us some headache. Okay, so that registry, there is tags, and we could just specify this directly. So this has gone through this process, okay, where it has the script, it's installed the plugins and all that. Now, there is two ways to do this. You can either do it directly within your Docker image like this, or you do it directly within the Helm values file. Okay, so if within this values file, if you search for plugins, okay, there is actually a section here where you can install plugins. So rather than embed it in your Docker image, you can just keep on adding to the list of plugins that you want to install here. Now, there is reasons why you would want to do this. There's reasons why you wouldn't want to do this. Now, the reason you wouldn't want to do this, first of all, is if you're running within a closed network and you have your Artifactory or ECR or whatever container registry you're using that you're using to pull your image, the entire network is locked down. There's no way you can go to the internet. Then this will fail because it can't go to internet to install plugins unless you then work with your network team and open up specific endpoint where the plugins are going to be downloaded from. But then again, every time you run your Helm upgrade and all that, you're putting a bit of overhead because you're always having to do this installation. The first time you're running your Helm upgrade or Helm install, it's going to take some time because it will, especially if you have a very long list of plugins. Okay. So the way around that will be to embed it in your image, and then you can build your image in a separate pipeline. Okay. Every time the pipeline builds, it pushes it to Artifactory, and all you have to do is just update your values file to point to that Jenkins that already has it built, which is exactly what I have here. So let me go here and actually pick the one that I have been used in this documentation. So there's few other things we'll come back to here, but let me see. All right. 1 second. Just look through this quickly. Okay. So this is part. So we're using 2, 3. Okay, 2.332, because they keep updating these. This is the most recent one, 21 days ago. So that is the most likely one to use. So let's use this. Okay, so we're going to use this. Actually, 1 second. Image. Okay, so we need this tag. Okay, so like this. Okay, so now we can pick this one and put the type there. All right. So now this is assuming that the image location is in Artifactory. So if we had gotten Artifactory to work, then we would have just pointed here and then specified the type. Okay. But for now, we'll just leave it at, so rather than go to Jenkins, this will then be direct registry / Jenkins. And then you'll pick this one up. Okay. So this will work. All right. So let's do this first of all and install Jenkins and see what happens. Okay. I'm going to name this just Jenkins. Okay. And then minus and tooling. Okay, someone said my audio is breaking. Is that still the case? I hope you can still hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right, so Jenkins has now been installed. All right, so everything is still basic, no ingress configured, nothing. So it keeps it so get port. So Jenkins is still initializing. Just wait it for a bit. Okay, while that is happening, so what I'm going to do is we're still waiting for that. So let's quickly configure the ingress part. So if you go to the values file and search for ingress, hold on, you see that it already has a section for ingress. Okay, so this is usually handy because rather than have a separate ingress.yaml file, you can actually do everything within your values. It's already disabled by default. You can see enabled is false and its specific configuration is not there. Okay, so this is where you may have a bit of a throw off because if you don't quite understand how they expect you to put the configuration here, it might be a bit of a throw off. But as you can see, you can put your annotations. If you need to make references to the Cert manager or any other thing you need to do, labels, whatnot. So there's an example here. So I'm just going to copy this part. So rather than edit the section here, we'll just use our override. Okay. So we'll just come down, paste that. So you can see it has its ingress section. We can enable it, have all of that. And then we'll point to the Cert manager. So the Cert manager certificate issuer, where is it? Let's just get the name. So this is the certificate issuer that we are using. We'll just put the one that you will want. Okay. And then the ingress class, put that in, and then the host that we want to use. Let's quickly check if Jenkins is up and running. Okay, so Jenkins is running. We'll come back to that shortly. Let's get the ingress so that we use something similar to the Artifactory we already have. So we're using Artifactory.masterclass. So we can use Jenkins.masterclass. You can just search for all of these and replace. And just put Jenkins. All right. But of course, remember, we have to make our DNS entries and then point to the load balancer for the ingress controller. So we'll do that as well. So once we have this, we can then run our Helm upgrade again to give us this new ingress, and then you will see Jenkins come up here. Yeah, so let's do that so that we can access it. Otherwise, the only way to access Jenkins right now will be through port forwarding. So if I do get a service, we do have Jenkins. It's a cluster IP. We can port forward to it to get our Jenkins. Let's do that. kubectl port forward svc / Jenkins, and then we can do 8080 minus n tooling. Okay, so if we come here and do localhost 8080, we should be able to get to Jenkins, and then this is how to get the admin password. So it's already giving us a command to run to get a password. So let's do that. So let's just copy this. Okay. So that's the password right there. So we're going to put admin and then the password. So as you can see, we have a clean Jenkins. If we go to manage Jenkins here, we can see if we go to manage, where is it? Manage plugins. Some of our plugins are probably old, but let's see, available. Actually, let me see if there is Blue Ocean there. Okay, it's not there. Let's type Kubernetes. So as you can see, Kubernetes is part of the tools that was installed. I mean, I think it's somewhere down. 1 second, we'll come back to all this shortly. Okay, so this is actually the list of all the plugins that is part of that particular image. So, or maybe not, maybe that particular one doesn't have all of this, but whatever plugins was installed as part of, let's check for answer color. As part of that image will be there. So let's see, answer color. Okay, so answer color is there. Okay, so this is how you would normally do it. So you wouldn't have to come to Jenkins and then install plugins, and it's already baked as part of that. So let's get the ingress part sorted, and then the other part we'll do is to now dynamically get our pipelines into Jenkins without doing anything manually. So we'll do that shortly as well. So it's going to be actually, let me just do this here.
Hello, Dari.
Yes, hello.
So this Jenkins is installed on your local machine, right?
No, it's in Kubernetes. So this
Okay.
If you remember, the way we installed it was using Helm, right? So
Mhm.
Helm connected to our Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so it's installed in Kubernetes that
Yeah.
is running a
Like, is the Kubernetes running on your local machine?
no, the Kubernetes is running in Kubernetes. It's an EKS cluster.
Okay, on
Okay.
EKS cluster. Okay, I thought maybe you are using maybe kind or something.
No,
Because
no, no,
I
no.
then how are you able to reach it through localhost?
That's through the proxy forward here. So if you
Forward.
can see,
Okay, okay,
it
okay.
gives
No,
your forward. Yeah.
all right, great.
That's the only way you will do it at this point because we haven't configured ingress and we don't have
Okay.
a
Yeah.
answer type. So
Okay.
the ingress part is what we need to do now. Now my phone is off. I need to use a
Like good.
two-factor. So I'm charging my phone now, but while that is going on, let's just see other things. So there's a couple more things we need to do. So we'll wait for that. Um, we can still continue using our port forward for now. Okay. Now the next thing is, which is the most for me, is the most interesting part. Now, there's a whole lot of things you can do with Jenkins, and you don't want to, as much as possible, you don't want to do them manually. You want them to be driven by your Helm values file. Now, there's something called the JCASC, which is the Jenkins configuration as code. Okay, it's a plugin, and what it allows you to do is to configure Jenkins as code, more like infrastructure as code. You use Terraform to put everything in code, and you just run it, and it just works. So Jenkins has something like that as well. And if you go for interviews, you want to be able to talk about Jenkins as code, configuration as code, rather than say you manually make changes in Jenkins. Okay. Now, I can tell you for a fact, not every team that is using Jenkins do this very well. They still have a lot of them that I've seen still have very bad practice with Jenkins, still manually going and do things manually. But if you work in a team, you want to encourage as much as possible that no one makes manual changes to Jenkins. And that's why you probably want to have two separate instances of Jenkins. One where you do your initial testing. You can manually configure things just to get to see how the configuration works. Once it works, you can then extract the code that it generates and update it into your other Jenkins that all your users use, and then you can run an upgrade to then put the configuration in as code rather than do it manually. So I'll show you how that works now. So there is a JCSC section in your values file already, which is good. So JCSC, if you put colon there, it takes you exactly there. So you can see default config true. So you can actually have different configurations. So what you can do is within this config script is where you can now put different configurations. The way Jenkins handles this is this. So whatever you put here is just, it could be anything. So this security realm is just a way to say, well, this particular part of this configuration has to do with security realm. So they've done this for you manually. Sorry, they've done this for you automatically. So when you install Jenkins on the file system within the container, it just takes this security realm and makes it the name of the file that contains this configuration. Okay. So if you want to start adding more and more configuration, you could just put it whatever name that you want. So we're going to do a few configurations and then you see how it works. Now, let's start first of all with, let's see which part we're going to do. Okay. So what we're going to do is, okay, let's copy this part, this whole section. Okay, and then we'll walk it from there. Because I don't want it to confuse you. I just want you to be able to pick this and then run with it. Okay, so this is the whole JCSC section. So from this JCSC, all the way to this part, because you can see this one down is another section entirely, because this is how you would know. So JCASC is right here, and if you scroll all the way down, this is this another section which is on the same level with that. So this is where another configuration starts. Okay, so what we're interested in is this JCASC section, which literally ends here, right here. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. And by the way, always read the documentation that precedes the configuration. So they kind of put some notes here that explains the next section. So here, what they're saying here, optional specify additional containers, is actually for the next section. So bear that in mind. So let's go into our override section. And then we can just put our JCS. So you can, as you can see, we're already having our override values now populating more and more. Okay. So what we're going to do, just to make things very, very simple, what we're going to do is, if you notice, this shows an empty configuration. Okay, so what we've just copied now shows that this config script is empty, and that's why this is commented out. So if we want to start putting our own config script, so we can just uncomment this, and then remove this double open and close curly braces. Okay, so this is supposed to be actually no, that's fine. Let's see. Okay, so what this is saying is the welcome message. So this is the welcome message. Okay, it could be anything. Like I said before, whatever name you give here is what the name within the container is going to hold. Okay, so it says welcome message, and we can just put whatever we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this and just put whatever we want. So welcome to CI/CD server. This Jenkins instance must be configured as follows. Yeah, you can just put something like that, so that anytime someone logs onto this Jenkins instance, they know that it must not be tampered with manually. Okay. So now let's go into our upgrade. We can just run on. So we can cancel this port forwarding and then run our Jenkins upgrade. So Helm upgrade. Okay. Jenkins. We're specifying our override, and that should be fine. Yeah, let me check on my phone. Okay, so that's been installed now. Let's bring back our port forwarding. Okay, it's not showing now. So what we can do is cube 60 set for anything today. All right. So it's showing that It hasn't really updated it. So even though we've put this in, sometimes this happens. Ideally, it should reload because if I do kubectl describe code and put Jenkins -0, you notice that it has two containers, and as you can see here, 2 of 2. It does have two containers here. One is meant to reload the configuration. So ideally, this shouldn't be happening. But sometimes, these things can turn out not to be stable. I've seen that happen a number of times. So what you can do in this case, sometimes you just have to restart the pod, or let's see if that helps. So I'll just do kubectl delete pod and to okay. So all that's just getting restarted. Let me just put this MFA code. Okay. I think I have issues with AWS. Okay, I'll sort that out later. Okay. So let's get this. All right, so that's that now. Let's just put a pot forward in and let's test it. Let me get the password again. Helm tests, Jenkins, Troubleshooting. Actually, I should have the command in my oops. There we go. This is what I'm looking for. Actually, not this namespace. Okay, let me get the password. Okay, it didn't update it. Okay, I think I didn't enable. Let me see. Default config. I think I have to set this to false. Okay, still true. I think it's Can you still see my screen? NEPA has just taken my light. Apologies for that. I hope you can still see my screen though.
No.
Oh, you can't see my screen.
No, I can't. I don't know if
I can't see your screen as well.
You can't. Okay, just
Welcome to Nigeria.
Okay, I'm sharing it now. Okay. So I think what's happened is that I need to move the indentation of this backward. I'm not sure, but we'll see. Okay, let's see. So this indentation right here, but this is one of the things that happens when you're working with YAML. Okay, so it's on the same level as the controller. Let's see. JC, let's see. One, two. Okay, so let's check the controller. So it's not on the same level with the controller. So 1, 2. So it should be on that level. Okay. So which is 1, 2. This should work. Don't know why it didn't work before, but let's give it another go. And again, you see why different tools keep coming out from time to time especially within the Kubernetes space. Some of these tools are not consistent. Some of them have one issue or the other. Even Helm is not all consistent. I mean, I've had several issues with Helm several times where you do an installation, the next time you try to do the same thing, it's not working, so it's part of the frustration. And that's why every now and then you get to see new tools coming up. Another open source tool has come out again and say, oh, this is better than that. And it just keeps adding to the whole DevOps frustration. Okay, so let's run the upgrade again and hopefully it will work. All right. Fingers crossed. Let's keep this here. Nope, it's not reloading the image. It's not making that change either. Okay, we've run it with even though we haven't configured the DNS, but I'd expect that it should create this ingress. So let's check get ingress. At least to show whether this is even working in the first place. Okay. It's not. So it's not picking up the changes in this file. So let's see. Mm. Okay, let's see if there is a content here. On this file. The file is there, it has the content, but it's not showing, it's not picking up the changes. Okay. Show Helm templates, that's what I'm looking for. So Helm template. Helm templates, Jenkins. MLS. Oh. Okay, so okay. So what this Helm template is going to do is to show us what our configuration would look like when we deploy. Okay, so what I'm looking for is the config map that holds the JCS configuration. Let's see if I grep. Let me just grab this. All right. So it's not rendering this. I can confirm definitely it's not rendering this, because if I grab for something else like Jenkins, okay. So for some reason this is not working as it should. So it could be, let me see, Helm version. Helm version. It could be a version of Helm. This is version 390. What's the latest Helm version? Helm version. I think there's a 391. Okay, so this is 390. So I'm using the latest version. I don't know. Tonight is not very great. Things are not working as expected. But what I would say is we just carry on with the thought process of what we're trying to do. Okay. And I'll try to figure them out. So when we catch up again, we can work it out and tell you what I find out. Okay. I'm just going to walk you through some of the most important changes. Now, so let's assume that we want to start working with JCASC, which is Jenkins Configuration as Code. Okay. So we'll put our welcome message there. It shows Jenkins. And by the way, you can actually follow this exact documentation and it might work for you. Okay. It's just not working for me right now, but it might work for you because I've done this exactly what you see here. That's why you see this documentation here. So you can try that and then let me know what happens. Okay. Now there is a section called the pipeline that you can introduce. So what you're going to do with this pipeline is within the pipeline, you can then specify your jobs. And by the way, this has documentation on GitHub. Actually, let me see if there should be the documentation here, a reference to the actual documentation. So I think this is here. Let's see, that's the one. Okay, no, that's the Jenkins. Okay, this is it. So the Jenkins configuration as code plugin. So this plugin that we're trying to work with now, it has all sorts of example code snippets and documentation. Okay, it's really, really verbose. So it can be very confusing. Okay, so I try to simplify this for you with the example. So sometimes some of the things that you see in this actual documentation, the director documentation, you can make reference to some of the examples they have here. So if you go into, I think it's is it demos? Okay, so there are examples of different things you can configure as code. All right. So let's say I want to work with, let me find a typical simple example. Hold on. Okay, yeah, jobs. So what we want to do is, we have our tooling application. Every time we provision Jenkins, we just want our tooling pipeline to be waiting for us in Jenkins. So rather than come to Jenkins and say new item, you specify your job, you say you want to do multi-branch pipeline, all of that. You don't need to do all that, okay? So with this plugin, you can actually just enable the plugin. Okay, there are examples. So multi-branch with a GitHub. So you can see the jobs and the script section. So, but this is what I'm going to walk you through. So if we scroll down, let me go to the exact example. Okay, so this is how it's going to work. Now, you put the pipeline. So remember what I said the other time. So whatever you put here is just the name of the file that will hold this configuration within the container. Okay, so it doesn't matter what you name this. So I've named this pipeline, and within that you have job. And this is taken exactly from the example from this particular documentation. So what you can have, the first script that I put here is to create a folder. So there's a folder function that you can use. And these functions actually come from Jenkins documentation itself. So if you go to, if I put on Google Jenkins multi-pipeline, let's just wait for it. So this is the job DSL plugin itself. It has its own API that works with Jenkins. And this is well documented as well. Well, whether to use well, it's another thing entirely, but it does help, at least making reference to something, because sometimes these documentations can be quite confusing rather than helpful. Now, this is not loading for me, so and I'm conscious of time. Let's just keep here. Okay, cool. All right, so it has an example here, literally. So as you can see, it's not like I'm writing anything from head. Okay, the hardest part of this is to figure out where these documentations are, how to find them, and how to interpret them. Okay, so I've done a bit of the heavy lifting for you. So if you're working with multi-branch job pipeline, for example, you want to specify branch sources, whether you're working with GitHub, you can just go in there exactly, click on this. It just gives you exactly how to work with things that you can just literally copy paste. Okay, if you're working with GitHub, whatever you need to do. Okay, but the bottom line is the main part of this function is here, where you can, put things inside. So the folder that I talked about just now, this is it. So if you want to create a folder, you just specify the folder, put the name of the folder, and it does the job for you. So that's exactly what we're doing here. So we're using this documentation here. Okay, this Jenkins CI GitHub.io job DSL plugin. Okay, we're using it to specify the script. So we're using the job DSL pipeline plugin. Now that job DSL pipeline plugin must have been part of the plugins that was installed as part of your Jenkins. Remember when we're talking about the different plugins, okay? Because without that plugin installed, this part will not work. All right. So if I create the folder, name the folder here, you put the display name, and then you can put a description. Okay. And then we go into the multi-pipeline job section. This is where we now specify which application we want to create the pipeline for it. So the beauty of this is the moment you're installing Jenkins, it's coming up with a folder. It's coming up with the pipeline, and this pipeline is going to be inside this folder. So as you can see, there's a directory folder and / tooling app. That's the application. Now, where is this application located? This is where it's located on GitHub. So if I copy that here and paste it, you'll be able to see it. So this is the actual application. So if you're supporting this application and you want a pipeline to be readily available for it every time you're spinning up Jenkins, okay, this is what's going to happen. And by the way, talking about tools again, Jenkins is just one of the many options you can have when it comes to CI pipelines, CI/CD, and all that. So there is GitHub Actions, there's GitLab CI, there's a lot of them. Bitbucket has their own. There's another one called Drone. There's a lot of options, but a lot of people use Jenkins. There are chances that if you're going to work in any team, I can tell you 7 to 80% chances that they're using Jenkins, even though a lot are beginning to move gradually into the whole GitLab CI, GitHub Action phase. So you might join a team that what they actually want is to have you migrate their pipelines from Jenkins to those modern ones. So you do need to have Jenkins knowledge to be able to do things like that. Okay. Now, the next thing is to specify the credentials to connect to this application right here. I mean, this repo, because it can be a private repo. And, if it's not a public, or if it's a public one, that's fine. It works fine. You don't need to put credentials. But if it's a private repo, then you need to be able to specify the credentials to connect to it. Okay. And then you need to put a unique ID. So all these, the way this works is well documented in the documentation for that plugin. Now, this credential, the next thing is talk about the credential. How do you then put the credentials in so that Jenkins knows how to pick up the credentials and work with it? If you work with Jenkins, you would know that there's the credentials section. So if you go to manage Jenkins, okay, and if you go to manage credentials, normally you would create credentials here, and then the ID of the credential, you can specify it here. But again, we don't want to do anything manually. If we created that credential manually, we can just come here and just literally specify the ID of the credential, and it will work. Okay, to create a credential, you can create different kinds of credential. You can create a token, a password, any kind of credential, right? So what we are going to do is we're also going to put the credential as code. Okay, so how do we do that? Of course, we don't want to hard code any of our passwords in here. So what you can do is you can create the secrets holding the credential ahead. So if you read this here, it says the most important part you must take note of is the credential section where the secret we created earlier is used. So in this documentation, there's a part we created a secret earlier. Remember, the first part is the secret name, GitHub. So let's talk about that. So when we created the credential, actually the secret, let me see if I can find out where we created the secret. Okay, so we created a secret. Okay, so this is an example of the secret. So in the YAML file that we use to create a secret, we can give it a name. So the data, the name of the key to that data is GitHub token. And this is an encoding of the token that you generate from GitHub. Because if you go to GitHub, okay, let me see, github.com/settings tokens. So if you log into your GitHub, actually, I'm not logged in, so it may not. Yeah, it's going to expect me to log in. And my phone is still switched off, thanks to Niger, because I haven't charged my phone. All right. So, but I'll still walk you through anyway. So if you go to that URL, it just gives you a form to fill where you get to create a token. You give it a name, and then it generates a token for you. So whatever token that it generates, you're going to then base 64 encode that. By now, I expect you to know how to base 64 encode stuff. So you can either go online, just do base 64 encoder, and then you can just put a text here. You can put a token here, click on, okay, this is for decode. So you can click on encode. So this time around, you want to encode. So you can encode it, and it gives you the actual encoded format. So you can then put that here. All right. So once you have that, the kind of the resource we're creating is a secret, and then you give it a name. So the name we're giving it is GitHub. And then you run your kubectl apply, and then you specify this file, it creates this secret. So that's how we're going to have a secret that connects to GitHub. Once that is done, okay, what you then need to do is there's a part in your values file that has additional existing secrets, because we had to create that separately. So if you come here and search for that, you will see it here. So you can enable that by removing these square brackets, and then you specify the name of the secret. So which is what we've done here. So the name of the secret is GitHub. So that's the name of the secret. And then the key name, which is the actual key name here, GitHub token, is what is here, GitHub token. So now Jenkins is aware of this token, of this secret that we've created. So the next part is to then configure the Jenkins credentials to use that secret. Okay. And the way to do that is you specify all of this. So basically, this is also another example of something you can pick up from the JCSE documentation. So you can just copy paste it, and then you can walk through how to use it. One thing, though, you have to bear in mind is how to specify the password. So the username to my GitHub account is actually this. Okay, so this is not the username, but this is an example of what the username is. So whatever your username is to GitHub is what you're going to put here. So the next thing is the password. But you're not actually going to use your password. You're going to use the token that you generated from GitHub. Okay. So once you have that, you now need to specify two parts. So the first part is the secret name. Okay. And then the second part is the key name. Okay. So this is the secret name. So if we go back to here, so this is the secret name, the name of the secret, and then the key name, which is the actual key holding the token data. So you specify these two like that, and that's it, job done. So once you have this set of configuration, what's going to happen is you run your Helm upgrade for Jenkins to come up. It's going to create your folder. It's going to connect to your GitHub, pull down your GitHub repo for the application that you're doing this pipeline for. And if there is a Jenkins file in this repository, what's going to happen is the pipeline will kick off immediately. Okay, it's going to scan all your repositories because it's a multi-branch pipeline. So all the different branches, it's going to create them all. And this is what you're going to see. So I think there is an example. So this is the folder being created. This is the tooling app that's been connected to. It just loads it up for you automatically. And these are all the different branches that you get to see. So it's going to run the branches. And, if you then go into Jenkins, there is, let me see if I can show you that. So you go to manage Jenkins, and if you go to configuration as code here, and then you can do view configuration. All your configuration as code, this is where you're going to find them. So if our Jenkins was working this night and we were just updating things, you basically come here and you see all. It's presented in the form of YAML, but it's not the YAML that Kubernetes is aware of. This is specific to Jenkins. Okay, so it's considered an advanced usage. Okay, so if you're able to confidently talk about Jenkins file for pipelines and also Jenkins configuration as code, when you're at interviews and you're asking questions around Jenkins, these kinds of things would give you a lot of points. Okay, so this is where I'm going to stop today. Apologies that some of the things we tried to do didn't quite work. Artifactory was mixing up. Jenkins upgrade was messing up as well. But at least I do hope that the whole concept of what we're trying to say still makes sense to you. Does anybody have any question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes, let's do that.
Yeah. Actually, this is my first day, but I think I discovered that I might be in the wrong class because everything is just sounding so strange to me. I wouldn't know what project you are dealing with today, please.
Right. Okay. Yes. So this is project 26, so it's way, way, way advanced. You definitely need to be on a much earlier set of projects. So if you just registered, all you need to do is just to, I believe you've gone through the onboarding class, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay, good. So just carry on with the first phase for now. The first set of videos, and then the first set of projects, the first 15 projects. So once you complete that, then you join the next batch to carry on with your learning. Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Even I think I've got an orientation tomorrow, and hopefully, I've been trying to set up my system for the what's it called, the workspace and all that. But I think I was having an issue, regarding downloading and installation of those virtual machines and all that. So probably tomorrow I'll raise that up in the what's it called? See if they can assist me.
Yeah, no problem at all. No problem.
So okay.
All right. So does anybody else have any questions? Oh no, that's good. All right. So so we're not going to be having a session tomorrow. Okay, I can stop recording right now. There's
recording stopped.
Tomorrow we'll meet again next week, but during the week I'll let you know if it's going to be Saturday or Sunday. I need to check when my flight is going to be because I'm going back to the UK. But again, I might extend my ticket. I'm not sure because still a lot more I need to do. But this is now thrown to people who are in Lagos. So we're doing a shoot tomorrow. If you're around, it'd be nice to have you around. It's a corporate profile shoot. So just out of interest, if you like to come around, meet the team, all the team, everyone you guys have been working with will be around. So if you're anywhere close to the island in Lagos, please feel free to come around. There's a lot of food to eat as well. So that's just to quickly chip that in. Okay, so thanks a lot for your time, everyone. And I hope to see you either tomorrow or next week.
We're on the island.
We're on the island.
Where is
It's
the
in,
venue?
it's in Shango Tedo. If you know where Shango Tedo is, after Abraham Adesanya.
Brahma, this one,
Address or location.
Yes.
Can
So
the address be on the Slack? So
Yeah. I'll put the address on the general Slack channel. Okay. One thing to bear in mind though is that the estate doesn't allow people to come in. So what I'll do is anytime you're around, I'll drop my phone number as well. Just hit me up. I'll get my driver to pick you up from the gates and then bring you in. Okay.
All right.
All right. All right. Thanks a lot, guys, and see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.